Welcome back to the Aussie Shed, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to bead roll and paint all the intake pipes. So let's get them off, get them all onto the bench, and we'll break out the Aussie Shed homemade DIY bead roller. Rightio folks, we're all set up here on the bench. Got all the piping. We've got the handy dandy Aussie Shed bead roller. We've got a ratchet, 13mm socket in it. We've got our vise to hold the bead roller. So, let's get set up. The first thing we need to do is just drop the bead roller into the vise. Obviously you can use any vise for this because it's just a piece of flat stock, you know. Set her up nice and tight. We're ready for our first pipe. So it's just a matter of buttoning it in up to that flat face there on the bead roller. Crank a bit of pressure onto our top piece there and just start rolling around. Each time you get one pass, just give it a little bit more of a crank down. Ideally this handle needs to be a little bit bigger. It's a little bit small, so it's a little bit hard to get a real lot of pressure on it. But it's not that hard. So this is our third rotation here, folks. Just a little bit of light pressure. Each time I'm going a little bit further than the last time with the pipe. We've already got a decent sort of a bead on there, but I'll go a little bit more. It really is very effortless doing this. Now we can adjust the size of the bead depending on how much pressure we put on the bead roller. We can actually get quite a big bead. Might take that out and give you a bit of a look at it. That's not a bad size bead that we've got there now, folks. I can actually get it quite a bit bigger than that, and what happens is when the top and bottom dies here, which is just a bolt with a stainless disc on it and a bearing with a recess on it, when they touch together it starts to polish the surface of the bead, so you know you're almost at a point where it's bottoming out. But that's actually quite a big bead when it does that, substantially bigger than what we already have there now. So if you have a situation where you've got a bead on a pipe and it's still blowing off, you can just increase the bead till it gets to a point where there's no way it can sort of blow off. But that's already a pretty big bead, folks. There's no way that's going anywhere. So we'll do the other end now, eh? As you can see, folks, it is just very simple operation to do this. Quite a handy little tool. It's amazing what you can make in your workshop at home with just just sort of hand tools. I didn't use anything fancy to make this. None of it's been done on a lathe, or basically it's just been done on a drill press. I have used a welder just to weld this piece on the top here, and to weld this kind of bucket up that holds this top bearing. But if you were a smart cookie, you'd probably be able to find a way around that, so you didn't need to sort of weld it. But yeah, definitely nothing fancy about it. And I have made a couple of modifications to it over the years. In the back here there's sort of a round piece of aluminium bar stock, maybe 2 inch, that's got a recess with a bearing in it. When I made it originally, I didn't have any bearings in it. on that main shaft. It still worked okay, but it started to loosen up after a while and get a bit of slop just from wearing into the aluminium. So that was, you know, a fairly easy fix. I just machined out, or not machined out, but I just drilled out with a hole saw a section in the back of this and just kind of cobbled it together again. At some point after I get this project finished, I'll strip the bead roller down and I'll show you guys how to make one, and you'll realise there's really very little involved in it, and you'll have a tool that's going to probably last you forever, and something that'll make all your mates jealous, because, you know, you really see some quite strange ways of retaining silicone hoses in sort of turbo applications. Mate, running a weld bead around there, yeah, you can do that, there's no problem with it. I'm sure it does it absolutely fine, but just the time it takes, and, you know, gas and all that kind of stuff, when you can just make something like this, or even buy just a cheap bead roller, and mate, it just makes everything so easy. So there's the second one, folks, just like the first, no dramas at all. So you can see that pipe now. Nice bead roll on either end. Very nice indeed. Very nice indeed. And what it does, it even tucks the very end of the pipe in. As the bead gets sort of pushed into it, it actually tilts the edge of the pipe over, so that it actually creates kind of a taper, so that when you're putting it into your silicone coupler, it actually goes in fairly easily. What I'll do is I'll check these after I'm finished to make sure there's no sharp edges on any of these ends here. I tend to smooth them off fairly well on the belt sander when I'm making up all the pipes, just for that reason, so that we don't end up with any sharp edges that are going to damage the silicone. But these two feel pretty good. So we'll carry on with the next two. That's one done. One other thing that you can do with this, folks, that I haven't mentioned, is if you have a pipe that's a U-shape and it stops you, and that sort of stops you rotating the pipe around like this, you can actually mount the pipe in the vise, sit this on the top, and just work it on the pipe, and it'll actually turn itself around the top edge of the pipe, and it'll create the bead in exactly the same way. But it's a little bit more awkward to do, which is why, you know, I'm not doing it that way here. But it's something that you can do if you need to, if you have a pipe that has a section on it that won't rotate around on your bench. Like I say, you just clamp the pipe in the vise, mount this in the top, do it up, and it'll actually rotate itself around the top of the pipe and form the bead in exactly the same way. You could power this with a cordless drill too, folks, if you wanted to. You could just mount a drill or a motor of some kind here very easily, and just sort of lock the trigger on a really slow speed, and you know, so you didn't have to crank it. But it's really, you know, it's not that hard cranking it, and it's good to kind of have that real kind of organic feeling of doing stuff too, which using motors on everything kind of takes away, in my opinion. Yeah, it does make things a lot easier, and you see me using things like, you know, battery powered ratchets and stuff like that. But that's just to, you know, help speed things up where you've got a real lot of nuts and bolts to undo, or just the monotony of just turning a ratchet for a really long time on a really long nut or bolt. But something like this, like I say, the hardest part of this is turning this little knob on the top. This is just dead easy, turning the handle. There's, you know, there's really no effort required in doing that. Another one done, folks. So that's two. That's both of our small pipes done, both the 2.5s done. So we'll get into the 3-inch ones now. Just wet the whistle. One of the big ones. It's exactly the same process, folks. Just pull back a little bit so I'm away from the camera. These 3-inch pipes are a little bit thicker. These folks, they're well, they are really maybe 2 mil, and that stuff's 1.6. But it doesn't really make any difference. Just as easy to put the bead on it. I won't do that one. I'll have a bit of a look. Yeah, it's not too bad. Yeah, it's definitely substantially thicker than the 2.5-inch stuff, but as you can see, folks, it's just as easy. No dramas at all. Very nice. Should do the job. Like I say, I can make it bigger if I need to, but that's probably big enough, I reckon. This is probably the only thing I've noticed that's a little bit harder, folks. Just tensioning that down because of the thicker pipe size. I'd like to grab a pair of multi grips and just use those to turn it, but like I say, that's probably the biggest flaw in the build of this pipe beater, is that that's just too small. That's not too bad. I think I'll call that one done too. Yeah, that's pretty good. Alright. 3 done. Thirsty work, folks. Thirsty work. My old hands are getting sore already, folks. That's alright. Like I say, that's not the end of the world having to do that. Also, you could even just put a bolt down through there and just weld a T-handle on the top of it to, you know, to make it a bit easier for you. Beautiful. Well, that's that, folks. All done. There's no way any of those guys are going to have hoses blowing off them, let me tell you that. Alright, so the next thing, I'll grab a bit of sandpaper out and I might just start going over all these and just roughen up that finish so it'll start to take some paint. So it's good to create a surface that the paint has got something to bite into. It's a little bit textured where the aluminium's been stretched on the bends and everything as well, and just rubbing it over with paper will probably help take a little bit of that off. But we'll give these a bit of a hit with some paper and we'll set them up to paint. So what I've got here, folks, is just a bit of 150 wet and dry. And I'm just going to use it dry to sort of rip a bit off. And I'm just going to stand here and just roughly by hand just go over all the pipes and just give it a nice rough up, a nice little bit of clean up, and then we're ready for paint. So I think I'll just speed the footage up, folks, throw a bit of music on, and I'll be done before you know it. Now, a bit of a final rub, just with some 400 dry paper. Rightio folks, they're looking pretty good. I think I'll go and clean myself up, give them a blast off with the air blower, bit of a wipe down with some wax and grease remover, and we should be able to get a bit of primer on them. They're clean enough now, folks, that we can start masking them up. Obviously, once they're masked up, we'll set them up to paint. We'll probably give them another wipe down and another blow off with the air blower, and then we'll hit them with a bit of etch primer, I think. Right, they're looking pretty reasonable now. I've just thrown some just random screws with the right thread size just in those holes there, just so I don't end up with paint down in the threads, and just put a little bit of masking tape where the MAF sensor goes. Hopefully that'll be good. All right, I'm just going to make up some wire hangers now for these things, so I can hang them off a piece of metal rod outside and throw a bit of paint on them, eh? Alrighty, there's one. Number two. Number three. Number four, folks. And there they are, folks, safely drying out in the Aussie shed. Kind of like me sometimes. Anyhow, we'll give them a bit of drying time and then we'll start fitting them up on the vehicle. Oh geez, it's just you guys. Don't sneak up on me like that, you could scare a bloke to death. There's been an accident, folks. I've broken an AC line. I was just manipulating one of the AC lines into a better position. I almost had it. And when you know it, I bloody snapped it. So, I've TIG welded it up. And I'm now pressure testing it in a bucket of water. I've got 100 PSI behind this. I've got it all capped off. And there's no leaks. So we're looking pretty good. I could probably shove a bit more pressure into it, but I reckon my makeshift hose caps will probably blow off without too much more pressure, but there's no bubbles, there's no nothing. It's all looking pretty good. I was pretty confident with the weld before I put it in the bucket. I'll pull it out and I'll give you a bit of a look. So that's it just there, folks. Nothing real great to look at. Looks a little bit crap, but it is a good weld. It's all nicely melted into the pipe. It's not porous at all. And like I say, it doesn't leak. You saw that in the bucket. I have actually had this under pressure for quite a while. I had it sitting under pressure for about an hour and, you know, no drop. I can read the gauge on my regulator, which will reference this if I'm getting a pressure drop or anything, and it's it's all good. So I'm pretty confident with that. Bloody unfortunate, I tell you. There are a few different ways you could approach something like this. You could aluminium braze it, which is the way a lot of these, or all of these fittings are put onto the aluminium pipe in your AC system. I could have aluminium brazed it, but I don't have any aluminium brazing rod for a start. And secondly, I think if I aluminium brazed it, I probably would have needed to sleeve it, just because it was a brake. I don't think the aluminium brazing would have been strong enough. I would have liked to possibly even sleeve it for this, but I didn't have anything to sleeve it with. So basically I was in a bit of a pinch. This is stopping me with my intercooler piping, which I'm pretty keen to start getting back together. And I had a couple of little practices on some sort of fine thin wall tubing, some thin wall aluminium tubing, and I thought, yeah, I reckon I can do it. So I thought, bugger it, and I had a bit of a crack at it. And it actually went pretty well. I got it very clean, obviously, before attempting it, but yeah, it didn't go too bad. Obviously it doesn't look the best, but it's a solid weld, it holds pressure, and it shouldn't be a problem. It was a little bit tricky. I had a wet sponge on this end of it here so that I didn't get it too hot where it's crimped into this rubber section of hose here, so it didn't damage this sort of crimp onto the rubber thing. It can probably take a fair bit of heat anyway, but I didn't want to take chances, so I kept a small bucket with water in it and a wet cloth around this end, and I'd do a little bit of the weld and then I'd quench it off again and cool it down and do a bit more and quench it off and cool it down, just so that I didn't firstly overheat this, so that the brazing didn't come loose in this fitting move, and also so I didn't damage this this section here. But I'm pretty happy with that. It's bent to where it needs to be now, which is awesome, so I can put it back on the car. And it won't stop me with my intercooler piping. So that's got to be a bloody positive. Alright, back to the intercooler piping. Actually folks, before we go and have a look at the piping, I'm just about to rehook the engine harness up inside of the vehicle, just up in behind the glove box there. So we might go into the car and I'll show you guys where the engine harness is connected up, and what to look for with the connections if you have to do a similar thing, if you have to pull your engine out, where the connections are, and what they look like, where they go, all that sort of stuff. So let's head in the car and have a bit of a look in there. Now this is going to suck a bit folks, because I don't have a wide angle lens to be able to give you sort of a real decent look at this. Plus I've got to sort of hold the camera while I'm doing things. Here you go, I've got another torch down there. Alrighty, I've made a little pile of rags to sit the camera on folks. I've got a better set of glasses on, so hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm doing here. It's a little bit of a pain in the ass because I can't get the camera down to sort of shine up underneath here. So these are your connectors here folks that came through with your engine harness. You've got these three that are in my right hand. So if you can get that out of the way. There's these three, and there's this other connector here, which I think I had to take off so that I could get to these, because they have to sort of be done in a particular order because of the way these locking clips lock down. I think I had to remove this because the locking clip was in the way of the next connector. So this isn't part of the engine harness. It's just something that I had to remove. As you can see, it's still attached, but these are the three that came through. Now, this white long fella here, it goes onto this vertical connector, just up there, as you can see. Now, I imagine a G37 is just the opposite hand to this. I don't know about 370Zs, whether it's in the same position or whether it's in a different spot, but this is where it is here. I reckon it quite possibly would be. So that's our first connector. We'll just pop him straight in. Not sure if this one has a lock. Oh yeah, there it is. A lot of these things have like little sort of handles that twist back as you put the connector in, that locks them down. Okay, so you've got this sort of cradle that you fit the connector into, and then pull the handle back and then slide it down, and that locks the connector in position. That actually pulls the connector forward to where it goes and locks it into position. As you can see, it makes everything very, very secure. Now this guy here, I think he was on the end, and it was first off, so it's got to be last on, I think. So these two here go up underneath in this position here. All three of these go along this section here. So I'll see what we can do. Yes, that's obviously our rearmost connector. So I think that one starts off in that position and then goes up as we lock it. That's better. That was in the opposite position when we started there. These guys here at the top, that's not where they go. They should be, to connect them on, they should be in this position here. As you can see, the locking lever down in the down position, and then when you push it in, it then slides it back. As you can see, they kind of sit over the top of each other, which explains why I had to pull this guy here off first. So as you can see, that went in, and as I pushed it in, it released the lock here, and then as we slide that, push that in, it pulls the connector in and then locks it at the top. And as I say, this is our third one, which I only took out to give me access to these two. The same deal with it. Put it in, that releases that, and then that's locked back. So that's our engine harness reconnected, folks. These wires under here, they're I don't know exactly what they are, whether they're mine. That's our main supply line to the fuel pump regulator and everything that I put in one of the previous videos. All the rest of this stuff, not sure. So I'll cable tie all that back nice and tight and make sure everything's right here. And while I'm in here, I'll just give you a look at all the crap that's attached to my glove box. Alright folks, I'm going to move the camera and I'll move this light. So I'll just handle the camera here, folks. Just try to get out of my own light there. So this is my glove box here. As you can see, that's the sort of glove box unit. So inside the glove box, attached to the top, I have components here that run my sort of PLX gauge system. These are the sensor controllers. You can see down there we have a temp, a pressure, and a boost vac there. And the pressure unit will do 2 sensors, and the temp will do 2 sensors. I think boost and vac is just 1 on that side. And then on the up side here, I have a DM100 controller, which is basically what all of these sensor boxes run into. And then I have the AFR controller, and I think that's another temp controller there. It would be, because I've got 4 temperature senders running. I've got oil temperature, water temperature, transmission temperature, and diff temperature. So you can see what I've done here, folks. I just sort of worked out where I've got a bit of space and attached all these things to the sort of top of the glove box and made up little looms, and what I couldn't fit are attached inside the glove box. And that's the sort of loom that comes off it all, that runs through and outside into that boat deck grommet that you've seen on the other side in a few different videos. So when this all mounts up, and it does mount up really easily, and you know, none of this sort of stuff interferes, so it's all pretty good. You can't actually see the glove box lid opens and closes as per normal, and you can't see any of the gauge hardware up underneath the top of the glove box lid, because you can't get down that low enough to see it. You can see here I've got an ABD plug tied up on the side there, because I don't use the ABD side of it. I could actually plug that into my ABD port and get reading off some of the factory sensors, but The factory sensors are very limited as far as what there is and where they are and all that sort of thing. It's just a bit of a pain in the bum. I've found that I'm better off just, as I've done, just put all my own sensors in. And the way this works is, you see up there, there's 2 gauges up there. They're quite thin. There's another 2 on the other side. And one of the gauges is the DM100 gauge. And it just works in pages, so you can get you can bring up 4 gauges at once on that. So it just has however many sensors and stuff you're running. It sets up 4 to a page or 6 to a page. I don't know, but it's just a little digital display, so you can have on it at any time. You know, so for example, all your temperatures will be just sitting there, so you can have all 4 temperatures on the one gauge at the one time. And all the other gauges, they're all, I think they're called DM6s. You can just choose which sensor you want to display on the gauge, so you're not stuck to a particular gauge, being your AFR or your oil temp or your oil pressure or anything like that. You can just set whatever gauge to whatever sensor. It's not a bad sort of a setup. I have found them to be a little bit unreliable in terms of sometimes they'll shit a chicken, particularly if the car's been left out in the sun. The best setup is the DM100 for me, or has been the best setup for me, is the DM100. It's been faultless and is by far the most usable, being able to display the output of 4 sensors at one time on the one gauge screen, and they're quite easy to read as well. Plus you can set up things like warnings and stuff. You know, you can have low pressure and high temp and high pressure warnings and everything, so the gauges will do all sorts of stuff, and you can set triggers up to run buzzers and all sorts of things if you've got any things like that. And the reason I bought them initially, or one of the main reasons I bought this gauge setup, was how thin the gauges are. They're very unobtrusive. And I made a mount there to sort of put them in, and when you're sitting there in the driver's seat, you know, they just kind of blend in fairly seamlessly into the setup. I'll go around the other side and I'll give you a look from the other side. Alrighty, so we'll get in here. You can see I'm in the driver's seat here, folks. Now on the right hand side there, you can see I've got 2 of these DM6 gauges. They're very thin. I've just made up sort of mounts for them. They do have just sort of a standard mount, but obviously anything that you want to sort of mount them custom, they're just mounted up there. And the mounts are on double-sided tape, I think, so that if I remove all the stuff, I haven't actually made any holes in the dashboard anywhere from memory. They've been in for a few years anyway, folks. And then in the center there's another DM6 and the DM100. You can see you can sort of see which part is the display. That this is actually, this one here is just quite a big square there. Like I say, it just has 4 digital readouts from 4 gauges, and you can set them up and run different pages, and you can set them up as one gauge if you want, with sort of an analog display like a needle kind of thing. But like I say, these little ones are a bit unreliable. They tend to, I've actually replaced a couple of them because they just did all sorts of weird shit, and for no apparent reason. I didn't get any help with PLX from that. They just kind of tended to wash their hands a bit of the whole ordeal, so I haven't found them to be the most great company to deal with on stuff like that. But it's not a bad setup. The DM100, like I say, it's definitely a favourite. If I could actually just get one more DM100 and put it beside this one, and then get rid of these 2 over here and just have the 2 gauges, and then from there I can have a display of 8 sensor outputs at the one time, just to keep a little bit of an eye on. And like I say, they do have they will run warnings and stuff like that, so that's pretty good. You can hook them up to buzzers and things. And plus these units here, they all have analog outputs, so you can run them to other things. Like if you had an aftermarket engine management system, you could run the outputs from these sensor modules to your engine management system inputs. And as I've done down here, you can see this is just sort of below that vent there. That's where my GFB boost controller is, and that's the deal with that. I've used the analog output from the AFR sensor and I've run it across under the dash into the GFB boost controller to give me, as I mentioned in a previous video, it has an AFR input so that you can set up like a boost cut if the engine runs lean or anything like that. Just, you know, more things like that you can incorporate, and that is going to sort of help with a bit of safety. But as you can see, folks, I've tried really hard to keep it pretty stealthy looking inside. It doesn't look that kind of leery. There's no gauge pods or anything like that, and the gauges don't look too out of place, being that they're all black and they're very slimline. When they're all turned on, like obviously they light up and they look a bit funkier when they're all lit up and everything, but when they're off it all looks pretty stock really. Now that I've got the engine harness hooked up, I can start putting all that back together, and that was the final thing that I needed to do before I can sort of put power back to everything. So I think it's time to go and have a look under the bonnet. Let's go. So folks, there she is. I've been quite busy hooking stuff up, so let's get the bonnet up, or the hood, as our friends in the US call it. Let's get the hood up and have a bit of a look. Oh, what's that, you say? Jesus Christ, Trevor, that's looking bloody good. Hang on, we'll just put this back on the tripod. Alrighty. Just a sec, folks. I've got a battery charger running over here that's probably making a bit of a humming noise, but it's probably going to be coming through the camera a bit more than I can hear it here, because the camera does pick up all sorts of stuff. There it is. Righto. Now, where do I begin? As you can see, folks, just about everything's back together. All the intercooler piping is painted and back in. That turned out very, very nice. I'm actually very happy with that. It all looks really, really good. It's just a nice satin black finish. As I say, it is an epoxy. It's quite durable, and as long as I don't make a mess of it, it should be pretty bloody good. Yes, what can I say? Just about everything's back together in here. Engine cover is just sitting on there loosely for obvious reasons, and our front radiator support panel cover, same deal. It's just kind of sitting on there just to make it look a little bit more complete for you guys. So yeah, what have I done here? As you can see, other than sort of hooking everything up, my dummy air filter boxes. I don't know what you guys think about that, but I've modified the air filter boxes so they can actually slip back over the piping for that stealth look, folks, because these boxes just mount up as per kind of standard, and they, for all intensive purposes, appear to be still functional. However, as you all know, they certainly are not. So moving over to the front here, folks, all that wiring has all been tidied up. I'll just pull this this apron cover off so you can see a bit better in there. Rightio, so as you can see there, folks, all the wiring's been tidied up and everything. That's all pretty good. I had a bit of an epiphany and got rid of the power steering cooler. I had it sort of temporarily set up along the top here in the previous video, and I've moved it down to a better spot down there. I'm much happy with that. I must have had a bit of the corona, mate, to be mounting it up there. I looked at it a few times and thought, what am I fucking thinking? That's a really shit spot to put it. I know some of you guys probably thought the same thing too, but you're too kind to say it to me. But anyway, it's down there now, and that's all hooked up bar one hose, which is the only hose that is stopping me from putting all the fluids in at the moment. Everything else is battened down. All the radiator hoses and everything are in. All the breather hoses are all hooked up. I'm not running catch cans yet. I do have a couple of catch cans that I am going to mount. So the intake breather line from the turbo intake pipe, they're just running directly to the valve covers at the moment. That's this guy here. Not that you can really sort of see too much. But what I'm trying to do is work out how I can hide the catch cans underneath the old airboxes. That's sort of my mission at the moment. I do have some catch cans, but I am prepared to possibly build some new ones that I can hide underneath these airboxes, just to keep it looking super stealthy. Because as you can see, folks, when you look at it like this, it just looks like a stock standard engine bay, other than it has metal intake pipes that have been painted other than the plastic ones. But mate, if you didn't know the vehicle or know this particular model, you would not have a clue about that. Fuel pressure gauge sits underneath the engine cover there. I only really need to reference that when we are tuning the car and that sort of thing. Like I say, I do have another gauge inside. That's the fuel pressure regulator up there, and the return line, where the return line comes out of. That has an electronic sender on it, which goes to the gauge cluster inside that we were just looking at, so I can pull up fuel pressure at any stage from inside without needing that one. I just thought it was handy to have that on the engine there, just for a reference, and just so that I could check the two against each other to be certain that mainly for the electronic one inside, that it was actually giving the right pressure readings, which they do seem to be. They're within sort of a PSI of each other or thereabouts. So yeah, it's looking pretty good. So I'm at the point now where I can start putting fluids in it. I can put engine oil, I can top up the transmission, I can fill the cooling system. I'm just waiting on one more fitting for the power steering hoses to be able to fill the power steering up. And once I do that, I can then, well, I guess the next step after that is I can then bring the car back to life, get into the software, get into the engine management system and everything, and just start doing a bit of preparation in there. I have to do like throttle position learning or whatever it is, because I've had all the throttles out and cleaned them and all that sort of stuff. So I've got to go through that. I've got to go through all the basic Nissan configuration of things for stuff that I've kind of mucked around with. And then once that's done, I've got to go into the UpRev software and resize the injectors and have a bit of a fiddle around that and work out how to actually get the thing up and running without it sort of clapping out on me, so I can start doing a little bit of basic cold start stuff and possibly a little bit of basic tuning just to get the thing drivable enough off boost so that I can get it to the tuner that I'm going to use, who's fairly local to me, without having to put the thing on a flatbed and get it taken up there. So that's where it is, folks. As you can see, everything's come along in leaps and bounds. I have been putting quite a lot of hours into it to get it to this point. So yeah, that's about all I can tell you. So I think we'll leave this video there, folks. It's probably getting a bit long in the tooth now. But the next video, hopefully I'll be at a point where we're pretty close to a startup. Like I say, I may either preemptively do a bit of that stuff, or I might film it and then run you guys through exactly what I'm doing and kind of show you how to do what I'm doing, if you're interested in doing that. Or possibly the beer fairies could take hold of me and I may just do it, not film it, and then have it ready for a startup. Either way, folks, we'll see. So if you're new to my channel, I might just put a link up there to the beginning of this series, because if you've just tuned into this video, you're probably thinking, what the hell is he going on about? What is all this stuff? Like I say, I'll leave a link up there and you can go back to the beginning and see exactly what's been done and go through the whole progress of just building all this to get it to this point. So anyway, folks, as always, thanks for stopping by the Aussie Shed. Bloody pleasure to have you here. If you like my video, remember to give it a thumbs up. If you like my content, subscribe to my channel, hit the bell and all that kind of stuff so you get notifications of new videos. And I'll see yous on the next one. Cheers.